Has the balloon been popped on the football season already? Well, maybe. Kind of the tone, kind of the vibe right now. It's kind of even how it felt like at the press conferences this week. West Virginia coming off of an embarrassing showing at Kansas in their Big 12 opener. So while 2-2 overall, despite everything, 2-2 overall, and they have the Brawl win, they were 0-1 in conference play where it really matters. Mike Osta here, Mountaineer Report, West Virginia Sports Now. You can find this and every episode of the show available everywhere you get your podcasts, on YouTube, and also throughout the West Virginia Sports Now network. Joined alongside by Luke Blaine, and on this edition of the show, we are going to dive into what the hell happened in Lawrence, what maybe is going to happen against Utah as they go back home, celebrate the past, induct people into the Hall of Fame, including Pat McAfee, the late Bill Stewart, etc., and try to reboot their year, then a BYU road trip, then a bye. It's a while before they get the bye, even though Rich Rodriguez kind of said they really needed a bye this week, and kind of check into now what the expectations are. With all the injuries, what are the expectations now? Because in the offseason, Rich Rod was saying, hey, we're going to win the Big 12 in year one. It's going to be just like Indiana. They're going to go ahead and contend right away. It's different than it was 20 years ago. 2001 doesn't need to happen again. He even told me 3-8 would not be acceptable for him. Had to be a contender in the conference race in November to have it be a successful year at minimum. Doesn't look like any of that's going to happen. Again, Mike Osta here, Luke Blaine, Mountaineer Report here, West Virginia Sports Now. So before we get to all of that, Luke, I've touched on this a lot. You haven't been able to touch on it yet. What happened for you at Kansas? I mean, obviously 41-10, it wasn't good. And Rich Rod, even after the game, said wasn't good enough, didn't play well, didn't coach well, all bad. He summarized it perfectly. Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, if you're asking what happened for me, I went to a friend's house and I sat down and I watched a terrific noon slate of football
Right.
just to throw what happened at what 6:30 on TV, and
Yeah.
glad I had that noon slate because that was just unwatchable football. It really
Yeah.
was. I mean, WVU didn't have a drive go further than 15 yards until the second quarter. You
Mm-hmm.
had one, two, three, four, five punts in the first quarter.
Yeah.
And that's just unacceptable. I mean, that's just not going to get it done in the Big 12. Anybody in the Big 12 will take advantage of that if you give that to them. And they were forcing punts on the defensive side too. The defense held on early. If
Mm-hmm.
WVU puts up another, 35, 41 points as well with Kansas, I think the defensive performance looks fine. It's in the second quarter, second half where the defense started to sputter. But that's the thing. The defense isn't on the field as much if the offense can get anything going.
Right.
And that's just where the game fell apart. It's the offensive side of the ball. They threw different quarterbacks out there. It's just they couldn't get anything to click. There was no explosiveness on the offense at all in the first half. It was just ugly football. And I really, I don't know. I mean, maybe I said this after Ohio. I don't know how you look at this week and, call it a win, and then they go out there and they beat Pitt at home. So it's
Yeah.
it's a big the WVU feels like one big question mark to me all the time. And it's like, because one week will tell me one thing, and then the very next week will tell me something different. And that's been the way. I mean, they've been alternating good performance, terrible performance, good performance, terrible performance. And even with Pitt, the performance wasn't even that great. It's just, the fourth quarter is what people are going to remember. I
Mm-hmm.
just I don't know. I mean, three and out, 5 yards, 5 plays, 15 yards, 3 plays, -2 yards, 3 plays, 6 yards, 3 plays, 2 yards. I mean, it's just, you're
8
not going to
punts.
win games like that. Yeah.
8 punts. Oliver Straw had 8 punts in the game.
Yeah. I remember you sent that thing. Apparently he's on some award watch list this year. He might punt more than he might lead the nation in punts. And if he can put up a decent, average on that, shoot, he might just win that award.
Yeah, the William Campbell Trophy, and it's for a great player on and off the field. So it accounts your
Oh,
GPA and also some good Samaritan work in addition to what you do on the field. It's all part of it
I
together.
thought it was a punter award at first glance.
Well,
That's
I
on
mean,
me. But
it's everything together. So you have to be
yeah,
a good football player, but it also involves things outside of football as well. But it's a cool thing for him, and I'm
yeah,
happy that he's getting recognized in a way because you could argue he's been the most consistent player on this team, whether it be Neil Brown or Rich Rod as the head coach. Unfortunately, and this is just the life of the punter. A lot of the comments on that, well, if the punter is getting recognized, then we're in trouble. Like in all reality, you don't want the punter to be getting recognized and be the team MVP, but that kind of is the case here for Oliver Straw. And if he wasn't booming it the way he was at Kansas, it could even have been worse because he was pinning them back and then they would just drive the field. And I
yeah,
do think that the numbers don't bear this out, but it looks like it looks like the worst offensive performance for Zach Alley in the Mountaineer defense since arriving. However, as you mentioned, it's a little bit unfair to say that because they were playing well in that first half and then they just got exhausted and the wheels fell off. I even asked Zach Alley if he felt like exhaustion played a role at all, even having to put so much energy into the prior weeks and then even in that first half, and if they just kind of lost themselves. Of course, he said no, and that's not going to be an excuse for him, but that is what it looks like happened. They just eventually got tired. They're on the field so much. And as much as this defense to me feels like it could be a championship caliber defense if it had an offense to go with it and it was on the field a reasonable amount of times. They forced 6 turnovers in back-to-back weeks. That's not something that every team does. Even winning teams don't usually do that, but there's just no offense to help them. No offense to help them. Zach Alley said that if we force 3 turnovers a game, that we would win, and my defense is usually top 15 in the country, no matter where I am. Well, that trend is going to be ruined this year because there's no way this offense can have that continue for Zach Alley unless, and we'll put a pin in this and get to this in a moment, unless the offense gets a jolt in the arm with potentially a new starting quarterback this week. Now, the odd thing about the Kansas loss, though, and going into this Utah matchup, as you mentioned, they performed so poorly at Ohio and then did win the backyard brawl. They actually, right now, are undefeated at home and winless on the road. So maybe they're just a team that does it at home and can't do it on the road. At this point, you feel like with all the injuries, though, it probably doesn't matter. Utah is a really good team. They're going to be hungry coming off a loss themselves. And then the other end of it is it's very possible, and this is exactly what happened last year to Pitt. They bragged about beating West Virginia for weeks, and they started losing and realized, well, West Virginia was not that good. This is not really a quality win, and we're not that good, and we're going to start losing some games. So Pitt was off after the brawl, if you noticed. We're going to see how good Pitt is. They're going to play Louisville. They're going to get into their conference schedule. If Pitt starts losing these games, maybe we'll find out that West Virginia got a nice emotional win against an average to bad team. I mean, it's not like Pitt. Last year they were 7-6, lost the bowl game. The year before they were 3-9. They fired their athletic director. It's just funny to me. A lot of Mountaineer fans compare and compared to Pitt a lot. Obviously, similar programs. You got to get that win. They got the win. It's a big deal. But it's very possible that Pitt is not that much better of a situation.
yeah. Well, I mean, I said
So,
it after. I said it like maybe during the game. I said we may be about to find out how many fans truly only care about the backyard brawl,
right,
because that's all I heard all
right,
the time was if
right,
Rich Rod can, right his wrongs and beat Pitt, whatever, anything else can happen this season, and we'll be fine. And
right.
I don't think that they understood what they were asking for, because because what you got is
Yeah,
what happened on Saturday, which
right.
was just unwatchable offense, solid defense that crapped out. Because, and like, let's not act like exhaustion didn't play a part in that. If you're on the field that long and Kansas is getting play after play after play in, and you sit down and guess what, your offense is right back on the bench in 30 seconds, that's
Right,
not going to help anything.
right,
And I think that that's the biggest problem for WVU right now. And I mean, I brought up the time of possession after Ohio. It wasn't as bad as Ohio. It was about 33 minutes to 26. So it
yeah,
felt way worse though than that. But I'm sure that the second half really helped clean that up, because WVU did get a couple drives they were going late just because
yeah.
substitutions and things of that nature. But That's just something that has to get figured out. You cannot be having these slow starts on offense in Big 12 play. Just can't do
Yeah,
it.
and they even had a slow start in the brawl, and Pitt
Yeah.
did too.
Oh
So
yeah.
it wasn't a big deal because Pitt was kind of struggling the same, and they both couldn't get big plays to roll. But then eventually they got going after the third quarter being so bad with Nico out of there. But yeah, I mean that's fair because you look at the Ohio matchup. They got killed in time possession. The yardage was kind of similar. Both offenses were struggling, but Ohio was mostly, according to those stats, winning the game convincingly. You could look at that box score and not even watch the game and say Ohio should have probably won that game by 2 or 3 touchdowns, but they kept making mistakes. Parker Navarro kept turning it over, and credit to the West Virginia defense, they almost were able to steal a game. I even remember actually somebody that works for the program turned around to myself and a colleague and was saying, he said, we, meaning West Virginia, we're about to actually still win this game playing this bad because they're giving it to us. And that's what it kind of felt like towards the end. But then West Virginia could not cash in. Their offense just could not cash in all those turnovers and let the defense down. And then the loss to Kansas, the numbers, certainly time of possession, and honestly, Jalen Daniels, even his rushing yards, it didn't look as bad just off the stats. Like if you did not watch the game and you just look at the box score, people probably think, well, West Virginia people are exaggerating. Daniels had, I think, 69 yards on the ground or something like that. Like Jalen Henderson had more yards on the ground in his series and a half of football in the third quarter. And yeah, Kansas won big, but West Virginia had a lot of rushing yards. The time possession, as you mentioned, was only a few minute difference. All true. The stats were kind of close, but it felt like Kansas could have won that game by 80 points. It felt like Daniels ran for 300 yards. Like it just was a game that felt like West Virginia never had a chance, regardless what the stats would tell you here. Luke Blaine, Mike Osti, Mountaineer Report, West Virginia Sports Now. Again, you can find us everywhere you get your podcasts and throughout the West Virginia Sports Now network. I do want to kind of turn the page here before we fully turn the page to Utah. We got to ask a question that now seems to be put on us really by how the program's even handling the season and kind of the vibe around the program and even what Rich Rod is saying right now. So in the offseason, Rich Rod was talking about from his intro presser all through his national media car wash, can win the Big 12 right away, can win a national championship pretty soon. You can do it in this era really quick. It's not like 20 years ago. I'm going to bring in a lot of new players. The transfer portal makes it easier. And he sometimes would say, you got to give me some time, but he was throwing bravado out there. And it worked, and fans got really, really excited, and some really bought in. And to his credit, they lost their starting running back. They now looks like lost their starting quarterback, lost a myriad of receivers, lost to starting center potentially. Half the roster here is questionable. Defensive players have been out. Jaden Bray also in a top wide receiver transfer. Second straight year he ends up out for the season after week 2. I'm sure when Rich Rod, Luke, in July was saying, okay, we can go ahead and contend in year 1 at Big 12 Media Days, I'm sure he didn't assume he'd have every starter get hurt and miss games, if not out for the year. To his credit, I'm sure he didn't assume that. But now he's out there this week before Utah saying that I've never had this many injuries in a given season in his 30 years, maybe one other year. In order to do it in year 1, like Signetti did, that he cited before, well, in order to do it in year 1, you got to have some luck on your side, and we just don't have luck right now. And he even said, I'm not that upset or that disappointed in the way the season's going because it's only year 1. Year 2 is going to be next year. It's no big deal. It's only year 1. It's a process. We got to develop. You use the words. It's a process. We got to develop guys. Use those words that fans got annoyed hearing out of Neil Brown's mouth even a year ago. Rich Rod's now saying that, and he was saying nothing near that months ago before the season. So it is only year 1, to be fair. And you could argue Indiana maybe had an easier schedule last year to help them. So to be fair, all the injuries, kind of a rough conference slate here. It is year 1, but what are the expectations now for you for this program, this team, either the rest of this year or moving forward, even into next year, based on how this year has unfolded so far? Because it's below the bar of what Rich Rod set in the offseason, but it is year 1 and maybe within reason of what fans should expect out of year 1. But it's still on the board that this is a 4-win team, and that would be a really, really bad year one and kind of mirror what happened in 2001 at the start of his first tenure.
Yeah, and I think I'm like everything that's happened this season. I still feel comfortable giving them that 5-7 record that I gave them at the beginning of the year, because simply because anything can happen in the Big 12, and
Yeah.
other players can get hurt. And even at that, even though they've lost some games that I had them winning on early in the schedule for WVU, so I'm not that particularly moved by a lot of the other opponents that they're going to see now as I was at the beginning of the year.
Okay.
Colorado doesn't look great. Arizona State isn't, I mean, they're 3-1, but they're not,
Right.
doesn't feel like a great 3-1.
Sure.
Houston is still Houston, I believe. TCU, BYU might give them some troubles. It's going to be interesting to see how Zach Alley handles a freshman quarterback at
Yeah.
BYU.
TCU looks
So,
better than maybe we thought, but
yeah,
yeah.
I think I was pretty high on TCU. I thought they
Yeah.
were going to be a
All
Big
right.
12 dark horse, and I think that they're
Yeah.
really putting it together at this point in the season. But I think we can be generous. I think we can say that, eventually the offense might click. That might give WVU a spark down the line. I don't see them contending for the Big 12 this year. And moving into next year, it is hard. Even in the transfer portal era, I still do see it as kind of like year one is still kind of like this gap year where you have to figure some things out. A lot of
Yeah.
new players, a giant new scheme, and you have to out when it comes to Kurt Signetti's case. Whenever you are in year one and you have players who are learning the new system, you don't really have that established roster. You probably don't have as much talent, especially in where he was in the Big Ten in Indiana. Probably don't have as much talent. I don't think this WVU team has as much talent as a lot of Big 12 teams. You have
Right.
to out scheme your opponents. You have to find ways to put your players into position, scheme receivers open if they don't have the speed to get open. Not that WVU doesn't have players who can. You
Yeah.
just have to find ways within the offense to do that. And that's been my main problem with this WVU team is it doesn't feel like Rodriguez is manipulating the scheme to the players he has, if that makes sense. I think you can't, people will say Nico isn't really built for WVU's offense. And it's like, sure, yeah, stop trying to force him into it. Stop trying to force the square peg into the round hole and let him sit back and be a pocket passer. Because with this injury with his foot, maybe that came from going on the run. And I'm not going to say it's Rich Rod's
Maybe.
fault that he's hurt, but
Right.
this is a system that Nico isn't used to.
Sure.
And for the quarterback to come in and learn a different system, very fast paced system, an option based system where he has to run and throw more than he did last year, it's I'm it just it's evident that it hasn't clicked. That's not just me saying it,
Oh yeah.
I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think that this is
Mhm.
going to take some time, and maybe it does take Nico hitting the portal next year and Rich Rod trying to bring in a new guy from the portal or something like that, or maybe even a freshman quarterback he really likes. Maybe Scotty Fox figures it out by next year.
Yeah.
But
Or
I just
Khalil
don't think
Wilkins. Yeah. Either one.
yeah,
Yeah.
Khalil will yeah, that's true. So maybe but I'm not sold on Nico being the fit for this WVU offense.
Yeah.
And I think when that happens, you have to be willing to sacrifice your style of play a little bit for the player that you have in front of you.
Yeah. So that's all fair. And I tried to ask Rich Rod a little bit about that this week in a way. And the quote I got from Rich Rod about basically if you need to kind of adapt the system to your player or if the system is just the system. If, for example, we talked about this even in the offseason, he downplayed it, but we tried to go back at it again because it was really evident at Kansas. If maybe you have a spread offense, but your quarterback's not the fastest guy in the world, is that a death nail or can you figure some things out? Because Nika Markiel got -4 yards rushing in Lawrence, Luke. I mean, it does not take a football savant to tell you Rich Rod's offense runs the quarterback. If the quarterback has -4 yards rushing, it didn't go well. I mean, that's just it. And he was able to get some yards on the ground out of Jalen Henderson and even Khalil Wilkins. Scotty Fox does not appear in the game, likely probably trying to save a red shirt situation there since that game was already out of hand. But he was able to establish some yards on the ground with quarterbacks outside of Nico Markiel. And the quote that I got from Rich Rod about that, if you change the system for the player, his starter, prior to this injury now, in Nico Markiel, or if it's just stubbornly the Rich Rod offense, is the quarterback involved in the run game will always be a part of this offense. That is out of Rich Rod's own words. That is the exact quote from Rich Rod. And the translation to that for me, Luke, is no. I run an offense in which the quarterback runs. I'm not all of a sudden going to start running a West Coast offense with Tom Brady and the Patriots dropping back, quick release, short passes, dink and dunk, and methodically moving down the field for 9 minutes at a time. That's what Brady did with the Patriots. That kind of does cater to Nico Markiel a little bit. We've seen Nico do that, and even more athletic than Brady, where he can roll out. When Nico rolls out and then can maybe find somebody, that's using his mobility. That works well with Nico. But based on that quote and what we know from Rich Rod for 30 years, he's not going to do that. I don't even think he has that in him. You can make an argument that Nico Markiel and his camp that are very in tune with his career should have probably transferred out when Rich Rod got hired. I mean, they know Nico Markiel better than we know Nico Markiel, and they thought he could deal with this. It does not appear he's fast enough. And to me, even though he's the best passer on the team and probably the best overall quarterback on the team in terms of ready to go right now for this year, he's maybe the worst runner, and he's not nearly fast enough to allow the offense under Rich Rod to fully click. There's a ceiling with Nico Markiel, and that was really evident against Kansas and also at Ohio. Now, in the brawl, it almost felt like he kind of went backyard with it. The last minutes of the fourth quarter and then in overtime, you didn't see running. He beat Pitt doing drop back passing, quick release, get the ball out. However, I don't think Rich Rod doing that for a whole game. And he might have had a few plays, but if you really look at those, Luke, a lot of the plays this is really rough for Narduzzi and Pitt. A lot of those plays were the 2 or 3 plays from the end of the fourth quarter and overtime, just over and over again. I don't know how many of those he even has. He probably doesn't have 15 of those to run through a whole game. That's just not the Rich Rod offense. So with that said, maybe there'll be a little bit of a blessing in disguise in a way. I would never wish injury on anybody, but he was getting testing. It hasn't been announced yet, but he was getting testing in the middle of the week in Colorado, away from the team, has the foot injury, which also really hurts you in a spread type offense. He didn't have a great day at Kansas. A lot of it was that he struggled to move, and maybe it was because his foot was hurt earlier than they knew. Rich Rod actually admitted he's self-reported. He didn't know Nico was hurt prior to him telling the coaching staff until after the game. So I find it very, very hard to believe that Nico Markiel is going to start the game, let alone play in the game. He probably won't play at all. I imagine he's not playing. And then I would assume that Jalen Henderson is going to be the starting quarterback as the veteran who did come in for Nico first at Kansas. Not a guarantee. Maybe Khalil Wilkins or Scotty Fox will start. I don't think that's a better recipe to win now. I think Henderson probably your next bet option as a veteran. So I'd imagine he'll start. So maybe they will at least have more of a spread offense that can run more, and maybe there's more success on what Rich Rod wants to do. But it does not appear that that's going to work. So what I guess to project forward, and this is maybe a show for another day, year one, I think he gets a little bit of a mulligan because he did beat Pitt. So he took care of that business, did beat Pitt. I know he said a lot in the offseason, but even people at the time are saying, calm down, Rich. It's going to be year one. Again, you mentioned Kirk Zanetti in that example that Rich Rod's brought up a lot. He also, aside from a little easier out of conference schedule, and he didn't win the Big Ten, but got in because he got favor in the conference that doesn't happen in the Big 12. But also, and he's a great coach, and to his credit, he brought in 30 new players from JMU with him. Rich Rod brought in some Jack State guys, but not nearly 30 of them. So he had a lot of guys that were with him at JMU that knew the system, that he could just plug and play, that didn't have to go through a learning process. Rich Rod had, Fred Perry, Cam Vaughn, a few others, linemen, but the quarterback, etc., all had to learn a new system. Nico Markiel wasn't with him at Jack State, learning a new system. So That is a big difference, unlike the Indiana situation, to be fair to it. And okay, you give him a mulligan for year two. Year one, year two, I think there is pressure to, 7, 8 wins, show there's something going on there, win a big game besides Pitt, which they won't even play next year, obviously, and then try to make yourself into a contender. Year two, I think there is pressure in this era that maybe wouldn't have been there 20 years ago, but it likely means finding a different quarterback. I mean, Henderson is a senior. Maybe it's Scotty Foster, Khalil Wilkins with the whole offseason. But another year of Nico Markiel at his speed level, I don't think that's going to work or win you a conference title. I would think there needs to be a Nico, your best to move on, or we're going to have to move on, or whatever. Now, it does appear that he's not going to start in this game. That is what I imagine is the scenario here midweek. Is Jalen Henderson the guy for you then, Luke, if Nico cannot go? Who is your starter? Because there is a debate that if you think the season's going off the rails, do you want to see what you got from the other two younger quarterbacks who maybe are even faster? Khalil Wilkins also looked good at Kansas. Would you rather see them since Henderson kind of struggled to throw the ball? You got to throw the ball a little bit.
I'll still take Henderson here, and my reasoning for that is, the team's 2-2. In an 0-1 hole in the Big 12. Sure, yeah, and in a game where they didn't look competitive at all, that's definitely cause for concern. But if you believe that, like Rich Rod said, if you have that confidence in your roster that you can go out there and compete any given week in the Big 12, even with injuries, you have to put the next best man up into the system. And I believe that is Jalen Henderson. Scotty Fox, he's still got a little ways to go. He led the team to a touchdown drive against Pitt, and this is not to take away from him at all, but he made a throw that I don't think any of the other quarterbacks on the roster couldn't make. It was an
Right.
option and then a short pass over to the right side. And I think that, you know, it is pretty obvious that Jalen Henderson does have the speed. He can make cuts. He can run. It is like a little bit of a spark plug back there if you're trying to run the quarterback to put him in there. But I think that this is the next best option. Maybe if he can get some more reps, first team reps throughout the week, maybe he can settle into the passing role a little
Yeah.
bit more. I'm not happy with what I've seen from him throwing the ball either, but I think he is absolutely the next best man up.
Yeah, and I think the issue too with the thought process of either Fox or Khalil Wilkins in this era of the sport, the whole thing of let's try to develop a guy and see what you have and then worry about next year, etc. It doesn't work as well because they could transfer out. Other players could transfer out. The whole dynamic of the sport could be different in a coming season. You don't have the time to just have a guy there as a freshman and say, oh, he'll be great as a junior. Who knows if he'll even be on your team as a junior? I mean, the whole redshirt business may go away in this new era of college football. Rich Rod even talked about that he even had the quote a couple weeks ago when people asked him about red shirts. Red shirt who? Red shirt what? For the next coach or for the next team that the player is going to be on? You can't worry about red shirting guys because maybe he'll do that, of course. It appears he's doing that with Scotty Fox. But in all seriousness, you're burning a guy that you may never get anything out of. He may leave and go somewhere else and then be a better player. Who knows how long you're going to be there? I mean, Rich Rod's going to get more than 1 or 2 years, of course, but it's not like he's going to get just 5 years to go ahead and lose. It took 4 years to win a conference title in his first tenure, and he clipped him off after that. But is he going to get 4 years to just keep on losing? I don't think he's going to get as much time as some people think maybe he's going to get. So there's a pressure to get this done in a wide open conference that, again, I'll keep saying it. And they're not spending enough, and they're spending more than under Neil Brown, but they're not spending enough to win a title. They need to spend more. The Indiana example is a weird one because not only did he bring on all those JMU players to help the system and help learn it quickly, Indiana, who had 3 bowl wins in 100+ years, way worse than West Virginia, they're now spending a lot of money in not only just basketball, but football. I mean, if you're Darren DeVries, you probably wish, hey, they just throw it all into basketball like they used to. But no, now they're spending it to football too, and they're spending more than the Mountaineers. So if you're not willing to spend more, you're only going to get so much. But it's also you're one of the 80 new players. You have to figure that Rich Rod as a coach would give you a win or two that Neil Brown would not give you. I don't think that works when you have all these injuries and all these new players in year one. The pressure to do that and to elevate and get a win from you as a coach and elevate the team and the players will be more so on year 2 and then really on year 3, depending on what happens next year. Luke Blaine, Mike Osta here, Mountaineer Report, West Virginia Sports Now. I do think Jalen Henderson got to be the guy. If not him, then I would imagine it's a quicker hook in a rotation, and they maybe will go to somebody sooner to fully put Kansas to bed. And I wasn't there. This really didn't get asked because it almost then got inappropriate to ask a few days later, and we had other things to talk about in terms of Nico's injury. Would you have went to that quarterback rotation sooner? And I asked that because against Pitt, he benched Nico Markel with the lead in the second half, almost blew the game in the third quarter. He then came back in and showed why he probably is the best overall QB, and they won the game. But he went to his rotation earlier against Pitt leading, and Kansas, he didn't really go to it until, I believe it was late third quarter, early fourth quarter. The game was already out of hand. Should he have went to that sooner to try to get some spark? Because Markiel was not doing anything on offense through the air or on the ground.
Well, if you're going to try to keep doing the run the quarterback, try, the spread option, then I would say put Henderson in. But if you're willing to let Nico sit back and actually read the defense and be a pocket passer, keep Nico in. It all depends on what Rich Rod is trying to do. And it sounds, based on what he's said, what he told you, that this is going to be a system where he continues to run the quarterback. And I just have to wonder how much longer, we're going to keep running our heads into a brick wall before we either change it or try to do something else other than put Nico in there, because that's it's just not adding up. It's not adding up. It's not giving the results that you wanted. And if in the time that playing Nico did give the results that fans wanted, it was when they let him sit back and be a passer and come back against Pitt. Shoot, he even dropped back from the pocket and made some good throws against Ohio that are going to get forgotten about, because I think WVU fans are going to try to forget about that one for a long, long time. But it's just, I don't know. It's one of those things where I'm not he's the head coach and can do what he wants. Also, like he told you, and I'm not the head coach. Like he told you, I'm the head coach and can do what I want. And maybe when I'm running a football team one day, I'll run it how I see fit. But based on what I'm seeing right now, I just don't see it adding up for WVU.
Yeah, and comment here, I see in the live chat here as we are streaming this before throwing this up on our podcast feed, going to be important to see which guys on the roster can be factors for next year. And Rich Rod's always evaluating, so I'm sure he has that in his brain. I'm going to evaluate for the future as well. A lot of these players do have more eligibility than just this season. If we don't get answered, we're going to be right back in the portal with a large number of new players. And that is very, very true. And that also is contrary, if people remember. And sometimes people like to forget, and what I like to do on the beat is remind everybody what these people say. What Rich Rod says, what players say, what other coaches say. My memory is really good. When somebody tells me something, I listen. My wife probably is like, you remember what Rich Rod says 8 months ago, but not what I said yesterday. But that's true. I remember what the coaches say. It'll be ingrained. So the point of it is, Rich Rod had literally said weeks ago that we won't be doing the in and out player, 80 new players. It won't be as chaotic, to paraphrase, in year 2 and 3 as it was in year 1. He kept on saying, as recent as a few weeks ago, we're not going to be doing this again. It's harder to evaluate. We got to bring a lot of new players in. It's year 1. They're learning a new system. He kept saying that even seniors, they're freshmen in the system. That's year 1. But year 2 will be easier if there are players around, and we're not going to have to bring in as many new players, etc. We're going to test that out because he's going to be doing an evaluation period. He may realize he needs to cut more guys, or some of these guys may want to leave because it just didn't work out here. And maybe he'll be back in the portal. And I imagine if they're bringing in 50 plus new players this coming offseason, Luke, that something went awry, because that was not the plan. Rich Rod made it very clear. The plan was to bring in a lot of new players in year 1, test it out, evaluate, make your cuts. Obviously, that'll also include some players choosing to leave, figure out who's hard edge. He thought he could win more, but all the injuries ruined that. And then in year 2, he wouldn't have to do all that over again. If this year doesn't go well with all the injuries and everything that's happened so far, maybe he's evaluating and having to bring in all these new guys again next year and almost making it like a year one all over again, which maybe it's a harder system to learn right away than he thinks it is, even though he says he dumbs it down. Clearly, there's still a learning curve right now. And Jaheim White would have one more year eligibility, but he certainly could leave. And yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked at all. There's no factual reporting I can give you that he's definitely going anywhere. I can tell you that he was leaving before Rich Rod came aboard after Neil Brown got fired, and even leaving soon after Rich Rod got hired, and then was eventually convinced to stay. Obviously, Chad Scott leaving almost had Jaheim leave. That all is true. But he ended up staying and then got hurt, and it sucks for him. But we will see if he's back next year, and if we really get to see Jaheim White under Rich Rodriguez for more than a game and a half, maybe that'll be a full-on what-if story in the history of the program. So now to flip the page, it doesn't look good. It doesn't feel good. This is a rough situation for the Mountaineers to be in against a hungry team that was recently ranked and a really solid program. And if you want continuity that West Virginia does not have, they have a new coach, 80 new players, a Hall of Famer of their program, but he hadn't been there in almost 20 years prior to this year. The flip side is Utah. They have the same coach who took over for Urban Meyer when he left 20 years ago. Luke, I believe, was 2 years old when he first got to Utah, which was after the 2004 season. So Kyle Whittingham has been there longer than anybody else in college football. And that program was successful in the Pac-12. It was rough in year one of the Big 12. Now it looks like maybe they're turning the corner, but they had that rough loss to Texas Tech. What do you expect out of West Virginia hosting Utah before a road trip to BYU? Both teams kind of desperate for a victory, but really desperate are the Mountaineers.
Yeah, very similar results last Saturday. I mean, Texas Tech lost to Texas Tech, not as badly as WVU lost to Kansas, but lost bad enough to drop them out of the AP poll after being, I think, 18, either 16 or 18.
Mm-hmm.
But one of those two, I know they were right next to Texas Tech in the AP poll.
Right.
But it was a bad loss. Had that game on, it looked about the same as WVU. I mean, just couldn't get much going on offense. So it's going to be very interesting to me to see how these offenses and defenses match up because WVU, I mean, it's a spread option with Devin Dampier, who's a very good player, very dynamic player, as Rich Rod mentioned in his press conference yesterday. And just talking about him and what he did at New Mexico, he came over with the offensive coordinator. And, you know, that's an instance of, you know, the quarterback isn't a rookie in the system, right? So you get to bring those two in. He's doing his thing back there in the pocket and scrambling, making plays there. Has about 250 rushing yards and about 790 passing yards, I think. So, I mean, he gets it done on both aspects of the offense. Since WVU tries to run a very similar scheme, it makes me wonder, you know, how prepared is WVU going to be for it in terms of this might be a low scoring matchup. I mean, it's not like we've seen Utah to be this team that can come out against a superior defense and put up a ton of points. I mean, shoot, they played UCLA, Cal Poly, and Wyoming, and then they play a ranked Texas Tech, and they only put up 10, just as WVU did against Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I could see this being a very low scoring affair, another situation where I'm not sure if either team hits 30, but you have to think since Utah's defense is playing against Utah's offense in practice, they'll also be ready for what WVU has to offer if they do that spread option. So I don't know. I kind of see a defensive matchup in Morgantown this weekend.
Yeah, and I would imagine that if West Virginia has a chance to make this game competitive or win the game, it has to be relatively low scoring. If Utah gets a 30 points, West Virginia cannot match that unless we really see something wild from Jalen Henderson on the ground. They're going to have to, pressure's on Zach Alley again. They're going to have to force turnovers. They're going to have to cash in on those turnovers. And they're going to have to figure something out on the ground with Jalen Henderson, Khalil Wilkins, Scotty Fox, whoever's out there. I'd imagine Nico Markel's not even a part of the rotation. So I would imagine we may see all three of those guys, certainly two of the three, regardless of who starts. They're going to have to make something happen. A real issue also is they need to get yards on the ground in order for the offense to roll, even if it's not from the quarterback. And Ty Edwards, who had 141 and 3 touchdowns in the brawl to make up for Jaheim White's absence. Didn't play at Kansas. Is questionable again. I'd imagine not playing in this game. You're going to see more of Dior Hubbard than we've ever seen. And he was a 4-star recruit at one point out of high school. So he could be a talent. Somebody even asked me if he's in Rich Rod's doghouse because he'd been really pounding Clay Ash if he can't go to Edwards or Jaheim. Clay Ash is a nice kid, but I feel like he's using him too much. He's just not going to give you that feature back talent right now. He's not ready for it. But I'm sure Clay Ash is going to be involved as well. But they're just going to need to materialize something on the ground to then set up occasional passes. That's just his offense. So I do feel like what you're saying is valid, that he probably should cater to his players. And I even see somebody here in the chat here, Eric. I'm pro Rich Rod, but I'm astounded at how little he seems to know about his quarterbacks. Shouldn't he know Nico is slow or Henderson has poor passing skills? It seems like he's learning as we go. That's kind of a fair assessment here. I'm not going to say he doesn't know the QBs, but I feel like I don't know how much film he watched prior to taking the job, because it does feel like that he got to West Virginia and he kind of was learning as he was going. And maybe he arrogantly thought, I've been running this offense for a billion years. I'm a Hall of Fame coach. I usually eventually win. They even cited it, Luke. Tyler Huff. Nobody thought he was a burner. And he got 1,300 yards on the ground last year with Jacksonville State, and he's a similar body type of Nico Markiel. They cited him a lot. Rhett Rodriguez brought him up a lot, that if Tyler Huff can do it, why can't Nico Markiel do it? And at the time, it was, well, fair point. Touche. We'll see what happens. And we get into the season. Tyler Huff wasn't running by anybody, but he was slowly, methodically powering through those yards in a lower level conference. Nico Markiel can't do that in the Big 12. And Henderson, who looked rusty in the spring, looked a little better in fall camp, but still looks out of sorts and not nearly the 4-star recruit that Texas A&M wanted to pay all the money. So it does appear that Rich Rod maybe thought he could fix these guys, could figure something out with these guys. He's a coach, he can develop them. And then we get here months and months later, and they're kind of the same. Nico Markiel's still slow. He's still a pocket passer. Jalen Henderson still can't throw. He's still a runner. He probably fits the offense better, but he can't throw at all. That's still the situation. And he's getting a lot of running out of Khalil Wilkins and Scotty Fox, but Scotty Fox we saw against Pitt. He doesn't make the decisions for a starting quarterback. He makes dumb mistakes. He threw 2 really bad picks. That can't happen. That's why he really can't start if you're still trying to win games this year. So that's a fair assessment there, Eric. You'd like to think that Rich Rod's not just, living on the fly here, but it definitely appears that way. And again, he's stubbornly not going to change. It's going to be the spread. Like against Kansas, these are two teams that try to do similar things. Clearly, that did not work in West Virginia's favor against the Jayhawks. We will see what happens here. I do think if it's low scoring and there's turnovers, maybe the Mountaineers can keep this close or even shock the world. I don't predict them to win. But if Utah can get rolling and they win the battles of the trenches, because they have NFL players on both the offensive line and defensive line, if they win the battle of the trenches, then this is probably a long day and they could win this. I think I was on a show in Utah and I predicted 32-16 in favor of Utah. Feels like that could easily be the score differential if Utah wins that battle of the trenches and they don't make killer mistakes and don't turn the football over. Where are you in what you think is going to happen?
Yeah, well, talking about that comment, I mean, apparently the quarterback battle was going into week 1, and maybe a little bit even into week 2.
Hell, it might be going on still.
Maybe it is. Maybe we'll have a solidified starter before the end of conference play.
Right.
But I think I'm kind of sticking with my gut here, where I think this is going to be a defensive matchup. I think, like you said, the trench battle is going to be very important. It didn't seem like WVU was getting very much push at the line this past week, and that's been a problem. So we'll have to see how much Jamori Robinson can impact that. And, like he got about 30 snaps, I think was what Rich Rod said his snap count was this past week.
Yep.
So, and do we have any new, they're not pursuing a suspension or anything on Fred Perry, are they, for the
no, there's no further suspension or anything. I mean, Zach Alley admitted that it was just stupid. I mean, it's helmet to helmet. I loved how fans were trying to defend it there. I mean, that was a dumb play, but there's nothing that I've heard beyond what happens and what goes on with targeting in terms of suspensions. No, he should be out there. Now, Can he control himself and not do that again? He's going to be facing another dual threat quarterback that's going to be running around, and he's going to have to be catching up too. Clearly,
Yep.
That could be a problem again. But him being out of there was a major deal. I mean, that was early in the game. They had no one to be that physical and stop and make a tackle once Daniel started running. And they also missed a lot of tackles. They didn't miss any tackles against Pitt. They missed a lot of tackles at Ohio and a lot of tackles against in the losses. The defense has been great. But in the losses, the defense has missed tackles. They can't be missing tackles. And it's another dual threat QB.
Yeah. So assuming the tackling gets cleaned up a little bit, which, I mean, it wasn't that big of a problem early in that game.
Sure.
You have to think that, but also the time of possession, I'm just not sure. That's what kind of worries me. That's what kind of makes me think that Utah has a chance at running away with this game. But I will say, I don't know, if we're giving our predictions, I'll roll with Utah 28, WVU 14. I think that if assuming Henderson gets the green light this week, I think that he offers a much better aspect of what Rich Rod is looking for in somebody who runs that offense. I think he can get some chunk plays on the ground. He can get a good 5-6 yards. He did that a few times against Kansas. So I think that we'll be looking at a little bit more of quarterback running, maybe some design runs, option runs, things of that nature. But I think that might help WVU get into an offensive flow a little bit, assuming, they don't have him air it out. I think that keeping it short will be better. I can't imagine why they haven't. I mean, they did it a couple times early, I think, but I love the idea of just getting the ball to Cam Vaughn and let him create those extra yards. Let him make a man miss. But
yeah,
I'm not the coach. I'm not the coach, Mike. So I'm gonna I'm gonna say I'll go WVU 14, Utah 28. I can't confidently give a stamp of approval for a WVU win after last week, which is exactly what I said over Ohio. So maybe they'll put up 60 and shut out Utah. I don't know. Anymore.
And maybe it's a good omen for the fans if Luke Blaine is saying they have no chance, because that I guess before
I'm not going to say no chance,
but
I don't like the chances.
Right.
I will say that
you have 28-14. I have 32-16. Similar scores. It feels like Utah will win this going away. They kind of need to save their year. I mean, if they go 0-2 in conference play, even if it's to one of those losses to a good team in Texas Tech and the favorite, then that's going to be rough for them. So the loser of this game is really going to be in trouble in a wide open conference and kind of out of it early on. So Utah has a lot to play for. This game is fortunately for West Virginia in West Virginia. That's a long travel for Utah. It's the same thing they're going to deal with when they go to BYU and Provo the next week. But maybe there's going to be jet lag. Maybe they're going to be exhausted. They have never, made this trip in terms of this team. West Virginia does play better at home. I've seen a lot of people talking about selling their tickets, though. If you care about this year at all, maybe this is one more year to give a damn and go to the stadium, because they are at home, and that did affect Pitt. Maybe the fans could try to help them out one more time. It'll be interesting what happens with Jamoy Robinson. 30 plays. Rich Rod said going into the Kansas game, he gets 60% of what he normally would get. So 30 plays. He should get maybe more in this game, maybe more the week after. You still got to get him game by game. But when does he really start making an impact? Does he ever? I mean, fans were talking about him walking in and getting 4 sacks a game. That's the way they were talking. That's clearly not going to happen. That's clearly unrealistic expectations. What do you get out of Jamoy Robinson? How does he help you as he's on the field? Because he's now an addition to this team that was not there at Ohio, was not there the first 3 weeks, and was there against Kansas. It didn't really do anything against Kansas. But to be fair to him, that was one game in and only 30 plays. I imagine he gets a lot more. So what does he do? And does that help get pressure on a mobile quarterback, get sacks, and create turnovers? And if they do those things, maybe they have a chance if the offense and Jalen Henderson could do something. But I wouldn't even be shocked if they do that on defense and then Henderson can't move the ball and can't complete a pass, and then they're just kind of screwed at quarterback again. That's what we've seen. I mean, Henderson's been hot and cold, and passing has really been a problem. So you can't just run it every play, and maybe they'll try that. But he's been successful on the ground and more of a spread quarterback than Nico. But we will see. And it definitely appears that Nico Markiel has not really been a fit for Rich Rodriguez. So when he comes back will be a question. What is his health status will be a question for next week. when he's healthy, is he the starter again? I mean, Luke, then if they somehow play competitive or certainly beat Utah with Jalen Henderson and Nico Markio gets a green light on health because he's not out for the year, then you got to make a decision where likely then you got to stick with the guy that just won and you can't go back to Nico, even though he won the brawl. So then you're sitting Nico Markio. I think in all reality, unless something drastically changes, it made sense to go Nico in week 1 this year. He was the incumbent. He looked the best in the spring. He looked the best in the fall. He maybe gave you a better chance to win right now, and there was a belief they could win right now if everybody was healthy. Everybody has not been healthy. It's been hot and cold this year. Nico does not appear to be a fit. I imagine that they can't roll out Nico Markio as the week 1 starter next year, even if he wants to come back. That does not feel like a fit that is going to lead you to contending in the Big 12, unless Rich Rod changes his offense, and he's not going to do so. So if he's not going to do so, I don't see how he runs Nico Markio back out there, how that ends up being a marriage that continues since the fit does not seem to be there. We will see what happens, though. It is a pressure cooker for the Mountaineers, who then have a trip to BYU against the good Cougars team, and then a freaking bye where people can get healthy. But boy, Utah has a bye after this game. West Virginia still got another game after this one, and then a bye. So they needed a bye earlier in the season this year. The late bye did not do the Mountaineers any favor at all. And it does appear they probably are going to have to go back into the portal for a quarterback next year. Have it be a dual threat quarterback that fits Rich Rod. Just get the guy that fits you. Just get your guy. Nico Markio does not seem to fit. Get a guy that fits you. Obviously, Henderson is a senior. Get a guy that fits you, and then move on from there. And, we'll see if he ends up getting sold on Khalil Wilkins or Cody Fox. If they stay, I'm not really sold on them either because the pressure will be on next year. If this season keeps on going the way it appears to be going, and I think after the brawl win, everyone was laughing, those over under 4.5, win projections on Vegas and the sports books, they're going to lose a lot of money. That looks like it's probably going to be the case there, or well on the under if they get embarrassed here again against the Utes. For Luke Blaine, Mike Asta here, Mountaineer Report, available every podcast, and of course our coverage will be on West Virginia Sports Now.